I would expect in the next 2 weeks that we'd be in the moderate level anyway,
Okay.
for what it's worth.
I believe. Zach, can you double check that we're on?
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to present our capital budget. Before I turn it over to Don, just want to thank everyone who was part of this budget process, our administrator, CFO, really got Mark and Kelly, everybody who, and all the department heads, everybody who, put their hard work together to present the budget for us to review and to look at. Thank you, Mayor. So tonight we received our full book, but we're going to be focused on the capital budget tonight. And I think we had mentioned that to everybody at our prior meeting. So the capital pages in the book are toward the back. So if you haven't seen that part of the book yet, you can open up to that now. And I think we'll start, you have the water budget, water capital, and then the borough capital. So I think we'll start with the borough capital. Just want to mention a couple things. Now, typically when we review the budget, especially for some of our newer members of the council, we don't, when we're doing the operating budget, we don't need to go through it line by line. I mean, some of them are pretty quick. But for the capital budget, there's some items on here that we may want to spend a little more time discussing. Since it's really not that much, I'd like to just suggest that we look at every line and then have a discussion about it, make sure everybody gets a chance to answer the questions. Now keep in mind, we've got a few budget meetings scheduled, so there's no pressure to make decisions on everything tonight. I think what we might try and strive for is to get a consensus on most of these items, either keeping them in the budget or removing them from the budget, whatever we desire. And then if there are some things we're kind of undecided about, if we need more information or if you want to think about it, we can hold it off because we're going to be meeting here again next week. So hopefully next week we could start by looking at any questions or remaining issues in capital before we get into operating. I do think the operating will move along quickly, though there's quite a bit more documentation to look at and to consider. But the difference here is in the operating budget there's a lot of things we've kind of already decided. I mean, we've already decided payroll. We've already decided, it's mandatory what our library allotment is. It's decided what our sewer authority allotment is, and a lot of other line items. So, not a lot of discretion there. So, I think, and what I said during my report was, the staff put the budget together. Just so you all keep in mind that Patrick and the rest of the department heads have been going through this and have already removed a lot of items from here or put them down the road, so they might be listed, but they're proposed funding in future years, if at all. And, so what we're looking at, I think, is what, when the Finance Committee looked at it, said, we didn't want to change anything here until we meet as a full mayor and council and make that decision going forward. So, hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at both the numbers and the explanations. And, I think it's always helpful to have this discussion and, be able to hear what questions other people have because they have a different perspective. So I think we'll start off with A1, admin, and take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. So if we can start at the bottom just so you kind of have an idea of the critical eye that I think we'll need to have as we review this budget. If you flip to the second page of the municipal capital, 6-year capital plan, you'll see the net indebtedness is $3.3 million. The goal for the borough is typically between 1.2 and 1.4 on a 6-year average. And the reason for that, we typically go out for permanent financing every 6 years. In the first 5.5, the spending approved by the mayor and council is as needed, borrowed with temporary financing. And so when you look at that, the permanent financing, once we go out to bond after 6 years, that's what sets up our debt service payments for the next, over the life of the bond. And so when we look at that 6 years, we try to target around 1.2, 1.4. Obviously, we could go, up to 2.5 one year, but you're going to have to either pay for it with less debt in future years, or with the expectation that you will have more bond and note principal and interest in future years. So that 3.3 number, keep in mind with the understanding we'd like to get it down around 1.2, 1.4. So starting at the top, A1, this is White's Pond Dam. Dam was constructed in 1939, reconstructed in 1976. We're required by the DEP to do assessments and reporting on the dam every few years. I think it's every 5 years. We were most recently required to do it in 2020. That report was subsequently submitted, and it laid out maintenance requirements for the dam. And I shared with all of you a lengthy dam report, and it lays out in there, concrete repairs that are needed due to cracking, spalling, settlement. The dam work is expensive, and a lot of that is because you're working in an active waterway. You have to put up cofferdams, and it's very intense work. So the budget line here, which was drafted by our borough engineer, $400,000 for that. Not really work that we can delay much for two reasons. One, the DEP has us on a timeline for completing the work, and two, it's of the nature where you don't want to be in a position where you're delaying dam work. And so, this is work where we've heard some whispers about federal funding becoming available for large infrastructure projects. Obviously, this would be ideal for that. The question is just, when that becomes available. And not knowing that, the borough should put themselves in a position for funding these improvements. Any questions on the dam? No? The second thing, East Prospect Street. So this is paving East Prospect Street from Franklin Turnpike to Route 17. The borough had applied for 2 years of funding through the NJDOT, which gave us about a third of the financing for the total project. The remainder to be financed from the borough. So that is, financing is about a little over $200,000 that we would then be responsible for. And that project would take place this year. So we would, probably at the next meeting, we'll have a new emergency temporary budget that appropriates the grant money we've received from the DOT. That'll enable us to award a contract to Boswell to start drafting the bid specs, and then we'll go out to bid and probably hope to award sometime in May or June to the street repaving over July. In addition to repaving the street, there's also some replacing of curbing and replacing of some curb ramps to make them ADA compliant.
So this is a pretty main roadway, and that's why it has to be repaired more often than others. Do we do a typical repaving? Do we mill it better? Do we put a better foundation? Is there anything done differently on a road like this than, a side street or something like that?
If we were to construct a new street in the borough, it would be constructed to the same standard as this would be. I mean, this carries heavy truck traffic, so you might be with a slightly larger base, but not much that you would notice.
Okay.
Not much, at least at this point, that escalates the cost. Okay. And maybe that answers your question. So you're going to do a typical mill, pave, and the road subsurface. You may require some box out repair, but that would be true for any road. And what's in the subsurface, the thickness of the subcourse, it may be thicker here, but that's not stuff that we would typically replace as part of this type of project. Yeah. But because it does get truck traffic, because it does get a lot of vehicular traffic, it just gets beat up more. So this was last paved in 2004, so you're coming up 18 years. We like to see a road last between 20 and 30 years. On side roads we can get there, but on main roads it's just they wear out quicker.
All right.
So, as I understand it, we're responsible for like 215, I guess, out of our 32 grand.
Yep.
How likely is this to fall on, or these kind of projects to fall on budget?
Boswell is good at developing a budget for the project. They're also good at, I don't want to say padding, but creating contingencies in the budget. So I think, as you sit here today, that's a good estimate. Boswell, we typically don't have issues going over budget unless there is either an unforeseen issue or some escalation in asphalt price, which does happen, and especially as you see oil prices increasing just over the last few weeks, that will have a dramatic increase on our asphalt prices. But on a $630,000 project, I wouldn't expect it would be to the extent that we're going to be talking about large change orders, if any. Any other questions?
And that's not a county road, right?
That's not a county road. No, if it was a county road, the county would be responsible for repaving. Yeah. So we have, in the borough, you've got Franklin, Wyckoff, and Crescent.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The next item, this is Harrison Street. This is repaving and some curb improvements on Harrison Street. This is a CDBG grant award that we got last year. It will be used in conjunction with another CDBG grant that we received the previous year, which we are using for the Frederick Street project. So we'll bid these two projects together. We'll get better pricing for that. And then because we're doing two large roadways in the area, DPW had taken a keen eye to other roads in the area that would be in need of repaving, and those projects got escalated maybe a little bit from where they otherwise would have been, because we'll look to repave a whole section at once. That helps us a little bit now. We'll probably have two contractors in to do the work, one for the CDBG projects, and then one for the municipal road repaving program. So generally, they're different contractors, but you'll have roadways in one area that were replaced at the same time, and we would expect would be replaced at next at the same date. And so that's beneficial to us. A4 is Brookview Park Bridge. This is a bit of a pet project, but I really like the borough property behind HCA and Malcolm Street. We have 12-plus acres of green acres back there that is, in my opinion, very underutilized by the borough. Residents, most don't even know that it's borough property and available for their use. Part of the reason, I think, is because there's restriction in parking. Right now, the access is really through HCA Park, which residents can do, but there's just on-street parking there on West Saddle River Road with HCA Park, and it becomes difficult, and it's kind of a long walk through the park to find what would be a trailhead that doesn't exist now. Given, I think people want to get outdoors and take advantage of these types of these areas, and it borders on Saddle River, which is beautiful. I'd encourage everyone to, if you have time to go back there, ask me, and I'd be happy to take you back there. But the improving access, I think, is crucial to getting this area more utilized. We have the Malcolm Street Pump Station for water and sewer as a sizable parking lot area that we could use, but there is a stream about 12 feet wide that cuts that parking area off from the majority of this park. And so this item would fund the application of the DEP for a bridge over that stream, as well as the actual construction of the bridge itself. The DEP permitting is very expensive. It's about $55,000 because they want to see how the area around it's going to be used. They want to understand environmental impact, floodways. There's a tremendous amount of surveying that would need to be done. And so that really drives up the cost. That's the first $55,000. The next $55,000 or $45,000, depending, we may be able to construct some of that with our own resources. Understanding that the budget is already over and there are items we're maybe looking to move off, the mayor and council could consider either using this project for our Bergen County Open Space grant application this year, which we would need to decide on in the next few months anyway. I think those are due in, we have to tell them in sometime between March and May. So in March, so we give them the project idea in March, and then we give them the full application in mid-May. So you're at a point now where we would start discussing those ideas anyway. I think this would make a really good program if you think that's where your effort's best spent, or could be struck from the budget completely. Yeah.
Just knowing environmental, like you said, and permitting and stuff like that. I know, I'm dealing with the DEP a lot. You're not gonna get the permitting done in 6 months, no less than 6 months.
Yeah.
Possibly a year.
Right.
I mean, would we consider splitting this in half and just asking for 55 now and then adding to it next year, or getting the grant? If we got the grant, then we can go through the whole thing.
If it's bond money this year or next year, splitting it doesn't really get us much of an advantage, because we'll take all this funding out for permanent financing at the same time. So by the time we end up paying this debt, we won't care whether it was this year or next year. So the question would be, do you want to fund this project, and then how do you want to fund it? Do you want to fund it through through financing on our own, or do we want to use it as an application towards open space? But yes, to your first point, yeah, this will be a lengthy permit review from the DEP.
They just don't take,
Yeah,
they take their time.
especially now.
Yes, I've been doing a lot.
Yeah.
So the area where you're talking about doing this, I'm not familiar exactly with the location of this, but I do know parts of that area do flood.
Yeah.
So, are we pretty confident that this would be in an area and constructed so that it's not damaged or subject to those kinds of conditions?
Yes and no. So the area definitely floods. Having been back there just recently, and especially after Ida, you can see debris washed up much higher than where the bridge would be. So it would, and part of the DEP's review is, they don't want you to put something in the floodway that's going to wash away.
Yeah.
They'll be critical of the type of bridge that it will be,
Okay.
and it will be built. It has to be built to withstand those types of environmental
Okay.
pressures.
I mean, I don't think it floods all the time down there. It takes
No.
an extraordinary event like we've had,
Yeah.
but it still could happen.
Yeah, and you can see by some of the things that we pull out from back there that you know of washing there, there's a paddle boat back there that's got to come out. So that's washed in from upstream, and
All right.
it's pretty far back on, right now, dry
The
land.
fire department's looking for one of those later on. in the budget.
We'll get to that later in the list, yeah. Yeah, it's an idea.
Patrick, I'm sorry, you done
Nope.
now?
Nope.
How long is this bridge and how wide is it envisioning to be? Like, what's the span we're
The
trying to get over?
the width, I believe, has to be less than 6 feet. They put a restriction because they don't want you taking vehicles over.
Yeah, it's a pedestrian bridge.
It's a pedestrian
but,
bridge, so
you
it'd
know,
be less than 6
bicycles,
feet.
whatever,
And the
but-
distance, the stream itself is probably 10 to 12 feet across from bank to bank.
So it's a 10 to 12-foot span, but you're gonna
Yeah.
have a much longer bridge than that.
That's
Get away
right.
from the banks, but okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question, can you just clarify the open space situation for me? Like, are we applying for a grant? Like, do we get these grants? Like, are we budgeting for 100K and then we hope we get more money from them?
Well, I'll start if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
please.
Yeah, typically what we can do in a budget is say, we will fund this depending on if we get a county open space grant. So you'll see in here municipal open space grants, that's money we control. Bergen County, we apply and compete with other municipalities in Bergen County. So we could say, we'll fund this if we get the grant, so we'll fund the matching part. And if we don't get the grant, we either decide we're going to fund the whole thing or not do it until we get a grant.
Okay.
And to the first part of your question, and Don can still answer this better than I can because he sits on some of these, you're on, CDBG, but the 2 grants that the borough gets annually are the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG grant, and the Bergen County Open Space Grant, and the DOT Municipal Aid Grant for paving. We get those 3 every year. And the first 2, which are county grants, there's a really good cooperation among the municipalities that receive those grants. So, we generally know how much we're going to get every year. In recent years, we're going to get between $75,000 and $115,000 or thereabouts. If we have a really big project, we can talk with other municipalities and say, we'd like more money this year, and we're going to forego funding in future years. And there's almost a handshake agreement among the municipalities in our region to do that. So we have a lot of consistency in that funding, and we have a good amount of flexibility on kind of what we need. So they're really good to rely on.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If I could just expand a little bit, I would greatly encourage the council to go on a field trip to this park. Patrick and I walked the park, and it would be wonderful for our residents. It's very wooded. We could put paths through, and I could just see like families or older people or anybody just taking a Sunday walk through this park. It's like walking through the woods, and it's a big, beautiful, peaceful area, and right now it's not being used at all, and I just think the residents would be so thrilled with this opportunity. Thank you.
And supposedly the fishing back there is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So there's something for everybody.
I think it sounds like a great idea. I grew up with like trails like that. But as I understand, we have 2 million from this project, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to make some hard decisions.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at all the other things on the list. So I don't know if we wait until we go through everything to have those discussions.
I think we will.
Yeah, perfect. So, any questions?
Keep in mind during that this park is not gonna be like Borough Park.
No, no, no.
It's more of a natural park.
Yeah.
You know, you can only put in, you're only gonna be able to put in maybe gravel park, walkways, and the only place we will be able to really develop would end up being over by Malcolm. So, and that's the park lot over there. We'd probably put a gravel one in anyway, right, or a paved one.
Yeah, there's a paved driveway and then grass gravel parking areas.
Because I don't,
Yeah.
if that probably is still in the floodplain, we probably can't put asphalt in there. We might be able to,
Yeah.
put probably gravel.
Yeah, I don't think we would put asphalt in there, but, yeah.
If
we'll
you
see.
guys have been into Ho-Hocus, if you go down West Saddle River Road, they have a park back exactly like you guys are talking developing, just as you get down towards Hollywood Avenue on the right-hand side. It's amazing. You have no
Mm.
idea, there's like 6 acres back in there.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can cruise all over the place and,
Yeah, neat.
you know what I'm
And
talking about, right?
this is the area where the Eagle Scout project had been proposed, and she'll be before us at some point.
If she comes with it.
All right, the next item is pool stairs. It's kind of an easy one. We did pool stairs last year. This is on the west side of the pool, the shallow end. We did them in one corner. This would just be for the other corner. Right now, we have that permanent set of stairs, and they may use, there's like a plastic kind of larger set of stairs that go in that aren't as sturdy. The stairs that we installed last year were really well received by the patrons of the pool, and they've requested another set be put in the other corner of the shallow end. Okay, so at the top here, so Borough OS is Borough Open Space. Then you got CDBG above it and NJDOT, that's a Department of Transportation grants. And then at the header just up and to the right from that, CIF is Capital Improvement Fund, which is a reserve type trust fund where we have capital money. And then the next one is capital surplus. It's almost the same account, but you can use it for different purposes.
So the open space fund is a separate assessment on your tax bill. And it's something the borough created many years ago, and it was like a 10-year project, and then we renewed it for another 10 years. And basically, it's a very small percentage of your property taxes that's set aside for open space projects like this.
Any questions? The next item, roof of the Pistol Range. It's leaking. This is the asphalt shingle roof, so it's not the large flat roof. Leaking and needs repair. A permanent replacement, I should say.
Is that considered one of the repairs that we tell all the other towns that we take care of as they contribute, or or is this one of those things that you get contributions from all the other towns to take care of this?
Good point, Paul.
Yeah, good point. We could. So this covers areas that aren't entirely pistol range use. So the PBA office and the Waldwick Pistol Rifle Club office is considered in here, as well as the kitchen, the locker room, and the storage area, which are kind of quasi spaces when you think about the interlocal agreement we have for the range use. We certainly could use. We get money from the Waldwick Pistol Rifle Club, but that will be going towards debt service. So it's almost like if you take it from here, that pot of money isn't so big that we could start spending it on other things.
They gotta walk through there to get to the range.
And they do use it, they do
Yeah, yeah,
use
no,
it. The
absolutely.
question
I
is,
think
you
Paul
know,
hit it on the head.
is it
Standard
is it
app.
exclusive use? Yeah, so we just amended the agreement with those other towns to,
We added one also.
and we will add one more town. We're waiting to hear back from the other interlocal members, and as long as we have a majority of them. We've heard back from two, we've heard back from one plus ourselves, we just need one more. And we would be able to add more money into the capital account for the pistol range, and we would be able to take in a new member, Saddle River. So, yes, that's a good idea. We being me, Colleen, and maybe the auditor, should give some thought to how that would work. Because I don't think that it would be a full contribution from the pistol range. But I think that some portion of funding would be appropriate. And if it's okay with the council, I'd like to have an opportunity to discuss that with them.
Sure.
All right.
Otherwise, the legal is kind of short.
It's not. The police department begs to differ. Garage doors at the ambulance corps building. So the ambulance corps building has one garage door that serves the two bays there. It is an old and very heavy garage door, and it is prone to breaking. We've spent, I don't want to say considerable money, but we've spent some coin over there recently to get it repaired. And you know that the time is coming when it needs a full replacement. And due to the nature of their service, it's not something we can have out of service for a while. And so I would recommend we put money into the budget. I don't think we use it right away. I think we wait until it really breaks. But when it really breaks, we're going to need to get it repaired right away. And so that's why, I'd propose that it be included in the budget this year. The door is so heavy and so old that when it breaks, we have to bring a forklift over to lift the thing up. That's how massive it is. So, questions?
Would we make it 2 doors so it's not as heavy and?
So there's benefits to both. Any new door we got would be a lighter door. You couldn't make a heavier door, so I'm certain we'll get a lighter door. But there's been discussion on having 2 individual doors. The benefit of that would be, 1, they're lighter. 2, if one were to break and you couldn't get the rig from one side, the other one would likely work to get the other rig. The downside would be you narrow kind of the drive lane for getting those rigs in and out, and it's already somewhat of a tight space. So I don't think that decision has been made yet, but it is one that would need to be made at the right time.
I'm a driver, that's what I know that those are not very easy things to back up.
The rigs, yeah.
The rigs are not very easy to back up inside the doors. You make 2 small doors, it's good.
Yeah.
You got the younger people don't have experience with the thing, they'll wipe out the door on the wall like that.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen no matter what. Because they allow anybody who's over 18 to drive. But they get training and they have 8-hour CEVO training and everything like that. That's a training stuff, but then they go into training with an actual driver for 6 months.
Questions on the door? All right, Borough Hall, second floor outfit. So we had discussed somewhat briefly the idea of having the Northwest Bergen Regional Health Commission take over space in what is now our records room. We've been working to reduce the amount of records. I am hopeful, I'm optimistic that we'll get to a point where we'll have a sizable open space. What's that? I'm looking over at Kelly and Colleen. Kelly, because she's the one responsible for records retention. Colleen, because she's the one responsible for most of the records up there. So, but we all have a role to play. And so, we don't get a lot of people. We get a handful of people here that are looking for Northwest Bergen Regional Health Commission, and we tell them kind of go down the street, and we lead them in that direction. It's a municipal function. I think it'd be nice to have it in a municipal space. In addition, we pay them, and they pay rent, and we have space. So the question is, have them here and have them pay us rent. And so this would be an initial upfront investment, but we would be renting space to them. I've talked with the health officer there. She's discussed preliminarily with the board, and they are in favor of this. Still some things to get lined up, The biggest thing being we need to free up the space. But we want to see that there's funding available so that when it's free and when Northwest Bergen agrees to it, we can build out this space. They don't have their current space, it's not like individual office spaces. They have a lot of partition or half walls. So I think, I envision something like that here, but you would need to put up a one floor to ceiling wall to separate our record space from what would be their new office space. You need to put in, you need to retro the sprinklers and the air conditioning just to make it serve that space better. And so there, you're talking maybe replace some carpeting or replace all the carpeting in that section. So there's some work to do up there. $100,000 is generous. The reason it's generous is we haven't paid the architect because this is very preliminary. So when we do, they would round out that estimate.
Do they sign a long-term lease or
Their lease expires at the end of this year.
how long is their lease typically?
I know that they're going through an ownership change with that building, so I had emailed with the health officer today, and we're looking to get some of that new information to see, let's say we didn't get this done this year, could they sign a one-year lease and we move them next year? Well, we would likely sign an agreement that's, tied to some market rate in the area for that type of class office space. But off the cuff, somewhere between 20, 25, 30,000 a year.
What about the towns that are involved with it? They can't contribute to this, or?
Well, they contribute to the commission's budget, and the commission would pay us rent. So the people that would need to decide that they are in favor of this move from the commission is the commissioners, which is made up of Waldwick Board of Health members and Midland Park Board of Health members. So they would make the decision to move. And then, just like we pay our bill to Northwest Bergen, so do all the other municipalities, and that bill, right now, our bill supports their lease, as does every other municipalities, and that wouldn't change.
Do you know how much they're paying now in rent?
Do.
What is
And
it?
it's around the estimate that I gave you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of why, I don't want to, I don't want to say much, but I think and the reason I gave you that estimate for income is they rent comparable office space in Waldwick. It's got to be a pretty true value. If we're looking to replace in kind, maybe a little bit nicer, but replace in kind, I would hope that we could get a similar rent. It comes in as revenue, yeah.
Right now, the only thing that that I can think of that we rent is cell towers. Outdoors, we have cell towers, a couple different properties, and that we get revenue from that. So I don't think we've ever been a landlord.
No.
Yeah.
We're a quasi-landlord to Wallback.
True.
We're a landlord somewhat to the Baseball Softball Association. And the Board of Health, I guess the Board of Health uses our Well Baby Clinic, so they have access to borough facilities. We have a door downstairs that separates this area from the municipal offices. Municipal offices are secure now, especially that we put in the partition, so I don't see any concern with them being here, especially because, again, it's quasi-governmental. We're not leasing it out to a smoke shop, Bob's Burger Palace. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other questions? All right. The next one, this is community garden. So the idea would be to install a community garden on the borough property along, kind of at the intersection of Houston and Harrison there near the train station. And in order to do this, we would, need water. So this would support a water tap and piping. We would want to lay out fencing, some of which goes underground, get a shed, get some tools. So this would provide funding for the startup of that community garden. And Terry, Councilman Sherman has taken an interest in this, so she may speak to it further.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a community-based garden where residents, and then you could always open it up to outside Waldwick people. They lease a plot of land, 10 foot by 10 foot, where they grow their vegetables. They do pay a leasing charge. The garden I visited was out in Mount Olive Township, and they charge $35 a year to be a member of the garden, and they also pay a one-time irrigation fee of $30. It's a nice thing to do for the residents. It encourages a lot of community, and what Mount Olive does, they also collect excess produce, and they deliver it to, or have the food banks come and pick up the food. So it's serving two purposes, and I just think it would be a really nice thing to do. That's it. Thank you.
How big is the actual area there?
It's very big.
It's larger than we need. This is the area that we,
Yeah, is it an acre, or is it, a half an acre? What are we talking about right there?
it's on a triangle, and you have a PSE&G right-of-way that cuts through there. I would say it's under an acre.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's half an acre, three-quarters of an acre, right?
Probably about 50 by 100.
Yeah, it's big.
But you also
It's
have to
big.
get down to, that's the portion that's not wooded. There's another portion that's closer to the railroad that's actually all, not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
we
and-
got
and the-
permission.
Yeah, the wooded portion is PSE&G right away, but
Mhm.
with the PSE&G has given us permission informally to use that property. So, their stipulation is they can come dig it up whenever they want, which is okay. But I think we would try to keep it on our property where we're able to, and we can, expand it to there if we need it, or, we could put the garden, or the picnic table or the shed there if we need to, things that are movable. But it's a big area.
It's a big area.
Yeah.
And
it gets
that
good sun.
property has been just sitting there, underutilized
Yeah.
for years and years and years. And, I just think there is a need. People are more into growing their own produce and such, and with our deer population, it's kind of impossible on your own property, and this would make it something for our residents. Yeah, there's a whole rule list, like you can't grow things that would block the sun from your neighbor's plot. So they're 10 by 10 plots with a 3-foot path in between each one. So you have a 3-foot border around each one. And you can't grow corn, you can't grow pumpkins, things, you have to keep it within your plot. So,
Is that a new legal plan?
Mhm.
all right,
No
that could
camping.
be on the list as well, yeah. Yeah, some people grow flowers on their plots, and, I know the environmental committee is looking at the pollinating and all that, so, it's good for our environment as well to have more plants. Thank you.
I know that the environmental committee has looked into it all as well. I don't think they were looking into that much money, and I think they were looking at more volunteering of, we would supply the town would hopefully supply the supplies, and then they would get volunteers to install it, except for obviously plumbing or
Mhm.
none of that, but,
Mhm.
but the fence and the shed, build the shed, build the shed. Obviously, we have to get permits to inspect them or something like that, but I don't think they were looking at quite that much money, or at least not that much money right away. So it might be worth it to add some money into the situation, but I don't know about that much money at this point in time. I mean, obviously, we put some more in, and then hopefully get them.
Well, how'd you come up with this number?
I mean,
Ah.
yeah, one of these. I spoke to Mike Latore, you know, he understands what a tap costs and what fencing costs.
Okay.
Kelly helped me with a shed number, but, I mean, this isn't an exact number,
it.
nor I think are the expenses, right? So we have flexibility both, I think, on the expense level
Got it.
on what exactly we purchase. We don't have money here and the council's, you know, wants or needs additional funds for more purchases, we can look at, you know, either recreation or buildings and grounds.
But
We
we're
have some,
mostly talking about running water lines and.
water and fencing are gonna, water, fence, and the shed. Those are
Yeah,
gonna be the big
even
ones.
the shed we could wait on,
Yeah.
like, right now, we
get the
would
And-
definitely need the fencing and the water lines.
And-
So that would be the only things you need to get this up and going.
And fencing's expensive, fence material itself isn't very expensive, but towards the bottom has to be like a finer mesh, you wanna go underground, and they're, how tall, 10 feet tall? So it's, you know, those posts end up having to be put pretty well on the ground. So there'll be an expense on fencing, but we haven't received formal quotes for everything that's in there. Yeah, this isn't an engineer's estimate.
I have a question.
Maybe 5 points.
Have we explored any grant possibilities for this? Like, I know that NJ Agricultural Society gives it to schools. Are there
Oh, yeah.
anything we can look into for the town?
Yeah, and we should. I haven't seen any that this would be eligible for, but I don't think that we've looked into that one specifically, and
Okay.
so we should. Yeah.
Okay.
What was it, NJ?
NJ Agricultural Society?
Sure.
We're gonna get donate, go around and try and get donations too, so it's, I'm sure with Commerce or something like that.
Yeah.
Farmers Market might not like it, but.
Yeah. And then the last one that doesn't have a number plugged in here, parking meters. We're not really sure what the cost or when the cost is gonna come, but we know that we're starting to have some issues with our parking meters down at the train station, batteries dying, machines coming to the end of their useful life, so we're evaluating now, but I don't have a dollar number to put in there, nor do I think that it's so near term that it needs to be funded. You know, if not in this budget, you know, at the earliest, maybe in the fall. All right?
I could have said that, in a couple months, I had to call up and every single meter was.
Yeah,
Out of the ones on the road, there was 10 meters and 8 of them weren't.
out of order, and we've had delays on getting batteries, unfortunately, for them. And so, and when they weren't being used during the pandemic, we weren't down there as frequently, and I don't think I'd taken notice as early as we normally would have, that the batteries have been starting to die on them. All right, so jumping down to DPW, road resurfacing, $150,000. This is less than previous year. Last year, we had $350,000. It was reduced because obviously the borough is contributing to $215,000 for the East Prospect Street paving, as well as money for Harrison Street paving. So we kind of reduced it by that $200,000. We do have some money from prior year funding that was left over, so $129,000 available from previous year funding. So we have $279,000 of roads that can be paved this year. That gets us all of Hemlock, all of Evergreen, Frederick Street from Franklin to Harrison. The remainder of Frederick Street will be paved with CDBG grants. Walter Nightingale, all of that, that's just 2 or 3 blocks, and that's in that same area that we'll be doing the CDBG funding for. And then Sherman Ave, this is just up to that first cul-de-sac, so it's not into the development of those 3 homes that are the one that's built and the 2 more that are in the process of being built. And then I also included roads that were considered this year. They were on Mike Latore's list of roads to be repaved, but with this proposed budget, would not be able to be paved. So those are Garibaldi Place and Manhattan Ave from Nordham to Ridge. And not included this year, but evaluated was that the roadway that the resident had spoken about earlier, Hudson Street. Yeah.
The last time Hemlock and Evergreen were paved, you just did the whole grid there, Smithfield and Wilda. I'm wondering why Smithfield and Wilda aren't in that consideration when they're in equally bad shape.
I can find out. I mean, there's a lot of, it's just, I guess it's tough just with the number of roads in town, and there are likely a lot that could be repaved now.
Okay.
And you kind of, you know, it's a fine line between what we are able to pave and not. We can reevaluate it, and the council, you know, if you want to add that to the list of things that maybe the council visits. I know that Councilman Ritchie had said he'd at least visit Hudson Street, so maybe I can add to your work, and I'm happy to go out there too, but, you know, not being someone who votes on it and has to take the full budget into consideration, you know, I think it's worth at least your time, maybe worth the entire council's time, because paving is one of those things that comes up all the time. So it's nice for you to be able to say we've gone and seen.
Yeah, and just on paving, so, you know, paving is one of those things that we've always kept in the budget. Tight years, good years, bad years, whatever. We've always kept repaving roads in the budget. We've never said, let's take a pass on paving roads this year. Never. You know, we probably, you know, didn't escalate how much we put into that line item until recent years, but we put quite a bit of money in. We always did one major road, like Patrick said. Just about every year we get a major road, and our matching part is usually between $200,000 and $300,000. Then you look at, now we're doing matching on the CBD grant road and paving regular roads. So if you look at, if we want to come in at around 1.2 to 1.4 million, just about in any given year, almost half of that is road repaving. And that's true this year as well. So one of the things we started talking about, and I know it was Terry's first budget and you guys weren't here, but is, you know, what's the right amount for road repaving? I mean, as you could see, the need outweighs what we could fund in any given year. So I think our philosophy and our approach has been just be consistent. You know, we just kind of keep at it. If we could put a little more in there, we put a little more in there. I think we've been, you know, pretty fortunate. Just so you know, we're part of a group of towns that go in and purchase road repaving together. So we go in with a group of towns to increase our purchasing power, but not on, you know, things like Prospect and the CBDG project. Those are alone. But well, I guess you might bid those together, right? Because
We will have to bid the CDBG project separately. 'Cause
Separately.
They have more stringent requirements that would just
Okay.
become cost,
Okay.
create cost inefficiencies if we did it for every road.
But we do, you know, the regular road resurfacing program with the conglomerate of towns in Northwest Bergen. So we get a little more buying power. I think that's under Ramsey's
Yep,
leadership.
Ramsey
Yep.
runs a co-op with us.
So we do a little bit better, but it's still expensive. You know, you look at it and you say for our 280,000, we get 5 streets.
Mm.
And not even all of the streets. Like, you know, it's between here and here, sometimes all of the street.
Yeah.
So it's a tough call, but it's not something where, you know, we could say, well, we're behind because we've skimped. I don't feel that way, and I think Paul, Tom, and Greg, who have been here, would agree. It's not something we've ever skimped on. So it's tough to keep up, and that's why you never want to fall behind. It'd be tougher to catch up.
Yeah, the one thing we've struggled with is to try to keep on top of eliminating some of the sump pump situations, and we don't have money to deal with that. Originally, we were gonna start teeing off into everybody's property so they could hook into it, and just hasn't been financially feasible to do that. But each time we do one of these road paving projects, I hope we're looking at how many of those homes have sump pumps and or basements and stuff, and if it makes sense to try to get those hooked up so we're not spending money on stormwater going down the sewer system.
Yeah. And we do still have some money for I&I.
Yeah.
And we did some small projects on I&I, 19 or 20. But, you know, I think the DPW had taken a look at areas that were contributing the most to,
Just,
you know.
just like I said, every time we do
Yeah.
a road, just like if there's any way of finding out, hey, how many of these people have sump pumps, how many
Yep.
have basements, is it worth considering doing something while we're there? You know?
But I'd say it's difficult, you know. I mean, sometimes there may be a road that, you know, is in worse shape than others, but it doesn't make sense to do it because it's over here and we're doing roads over here.
Yeah,
So that happens as well, and you know, maybe a road in worse shape gets pushed off another year because of that as well. So lots of things to consider when we're looking at the roads. You know, if you do look at these streets and the ones on the wish list in Hudson or whatever, and you drive around, you'll see the difference in them and you'll know why. You know, last year we were doing Stewart and the courts, and I thought, well, I don't think they're in that bad shape. It's near my neighborhood, so I actually drove up them. They were in terrible shape. And it seems like it happens overnight, or you just don't notice it. I don't know what it is, but yeah, they needed to be redone. And it made sense to do them all at once, because how could you do 2 courts and not do the others?
Yeah.
So,
And to add, what we didn't get to pave that was on DPW's list this year, Garibaldi and Manhattan. When we do municipal road repaving, we're required by ADA law to upgrade any of the curb ramps into compliance. Some are in compliance, some are not. It costs about $2,500 to upgrade. So Garibaldi was the next on the list. That would have cost us about $22,000 to pave, but there are 12 ramps on Garibaldi that would need replacing, so that's $30,000. So now we would have had to increase, in addition to increasing our paving budget to get to Garibaldi, we would also have to increase the line we have in here, which is the next line, the $70,000 for ADA ramps, in order to fund those curb ramps that were required on Garibaldi. So, a lot to consider. All right. So the next one's ADA ramps. This is just part of our municipal road repaving program, where we will upgrade ramps into ADA compliance, and some of this money is spent for engineering for those ramps. The next one is a tire machine. We replace a lot of our own tires at DPW. We have a mechanic there who does a real good job of lowering our costs by keeping some of that work in-house. But we have big machines, and we have a tire machine that is unable to change all the tires in DPW. So this would be just for a bigger tire machine, enable us to do more tires. It's it's got a long life, and this will, in the long run, save us money. Questions on the tire machine? All right. Replace the body of mason dump. The mason dump's in good shape. The body is rusted and rotted out, so it's not very useful to us now as a mason dump. Put a new body on it for a relatively inexpensive amount, and we'll greatly extend the life of that truck. Questions on the dump body?
so put the body on, it probably doesn't extend it with the normal life of the truck, but it extends it. What is the cost of a new mason dump these days? Do you know offhand, roughly?
Yeah, recently, I want to say we've spent around $60,000 getting the mason. We had funded it recently, maybe 2 years ago. We funded for the purchase of a mason dump for the water department, and I could pull that up for you.
If the whole truck goes in 2 years, for example, and we can sell what we're buying now,
We could likely use it ourselves.
so we could use it.
Yeah,
You would take that new part off.
yeah, yeah. And there's no expectation that the truck will go in 2 years. Otherwise, we would consider auctioning it as opposed to getting a new one. All right, then we get into the big dollar items. Replacing cat loader, $275,000. The DPW has 2 cat loaders. We use them for snow removal, salt, loading into the trucks. We use them for leaf pickup, water main breaks when we're running gravel and materials around. They get used heavily. So they're machines that, when you get in them, they need to start up and they need to function well. The one we have now is 18 years old. As Mike Latore describes it, it's getting loose, and especially the pivot point. So those machines are on a center pivot point, and that pivot point over time will get loose, which is just kind of bearings and machinery wearing. That's getting loose, and there's a considerable amount of rust on the machine. So while it doesn't need replacing today, his concern is if we don't replace it proactively when he needs it, it will be unavailable to him. These have a long lead time, so even if the borough council were to approve funding for this, we put it in order, maybe we would get the item next year. We're still waiting for trucks that we ordered last year. Obviously, these, the last year has been exceptional in terms of those delays, but this is a long lead item, and so we would auction it off. How much could we get for it? Yeah, it depends at the time, but you can, it's a useful machine, so it's not like a fire truck where when you auction it off, maybe you get $2,000. Someone will use it, someone who doesn't need it to be as dependable. New truck, $275, I could give you an exact number based on today, look at recent sales and see if you're interested. I mean, yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I mean, I think that might be a little high, but I think it's around there, yeah. Yeah, and I'll look at something.
We would effectively consider getting a used one. We always have to get a new one.
We typically would get a new one. Yeah, the used, yeah, we treat our machines better, I think, than a general contractor would. No offense to general contractors, but I would say. So, yeah, and I spoke with Mike about that. Like, why don't we just run this thing into the ground, and then when it dies, we go to United Rentals and rent one. The rental for this is in the hundreds of dollars a month, and when we need them, snow season, that leaf season, they're difficult to get.
Well, and it may make more sense to lease something if you don't use it year-round. We do use this year-round.
Yeah, but I think the lease would be like a short-term stopgap, like let's run it
Gotcha.
till it dies.
Oh, I see.
And then the lease would provide us time to fund and purchase it. But yeah, I understand. This is, especially with we're gonna come up to a lot of items like this, and that you have to make a decision, especially given the overall budget. If it breaks and we haven't funded a replacement, can we withstand any criticism or any impact to services while we get the replacement? So for this item, if leaf pickup is delayed, if snow removal is slowed, those are the effects. And those are things where, you may say, yeah, financially, we'd like to be conservative, not fund this, let's wait till it breaks. Understanding that when the public comes back or when services are impacted, we're ready for that, and understanding you made a decision.
So we don't deal in absolutes, what's the probability that it dies?
Well, it's 18 years old. The probability that it dies in the next, say, 6 years is pretty good. But this year, oof. This was, Mike has requested this for the last 2 years. I think the first year I pushed it off completely. The second year, the mayor and council chose to push it off.
I think we bought the roll-off.
We bought the roll-off truck, which is a big purchase. The likelihood that it dies this year, I mean, if I could put odds on that, I might not be an administrator.
What's good about it is you said we have two.
We do have 2 of them, yeah, and both
They're not being completely.
Both are used. We also have other bucket apparatus. So we've got backhoes, right? We've got a small bucket loader as well. So we have other things that could be used as a stopgap. Yeah, but there would be an impact.
Well, and he was smart to ask for it in a year where he's not asking for another big ticket item.
Yes, yes. So, and I've
Bit
ordered
bigger
this,
than 6 digits.
understanding that the mayor and council had some cuts to be made. I ordered this kind of in order where maybe we can make cuts. So the bucket loader was something that he had really stressed is important for his budget this year. With the bucket loader is the snow pusher, just goes in the front and pushes snow. And the next thing is a tink bucket, very useful. I'm surprised we don't have one already. You see them in most other DPWs. Kind of a clamshell bucket that goes on the front of a bucket loader. So you take the big scoop bucket off. It's a hydraulic run claw, and it has a flat bottom. So you can come up to, like, let's say a pile of leaves, a pile of brush, and scoop it up, and it's all kind of trapped in there. It's really good for taking material off the road and loading it into trucks. So he had asked for those 2 attachments to be included with the loader. Questions on the attachments? All right, so then you get to the mini excavator. Currently, we use the 2 backhoes that the borough has for excavating. They're not as nimble as a mini excavator would be. The mini X has greater swing radius, typically, a more nimble arm, better visibility, is more useful in tight spaces. The one he has quoted here also includes a mower attachment, so it's a mower that goes onto the arm that we can use for, sides of roadways, sides of trailways. some heavy brush trimming. So that just kind of, it's a rather inexpensive attachment that should this be funded, he would find useful. They're not up for replacement right now. Now, so I think you would keep them, because you're not going to get the full value out of them, let's say if you auction them. But when they die, there would be another consideration for, is there a replacement necessary? No. Well, the the backhoes are easier to run around town, right, because they're on wheels. This would be a track machine. So the bucket loaders or not the bucket loaders, the backhoes are easier to run around town. They're more of like a Swiss Army knife in that you got a bucket in the front and an excavating arm on the back. So you'd always want to have that tool. Do we need, I believe now we have two of them. Do we need both of the ones we have? Yeah, if we got an excavator, the council would want to consider if that needs to be replaced when it is at the end of its useful life.
Yeah, so we would have two, we would have this in addition to two.
Yeah.
There. And this is on tracks.
Yeah. So you're putting it on a trailer, taking it where you need to go.
They could really do without this right now.
It's an interesting ask, yeah. In the context of everything.
Yeah, and understand that only to defend him or any department head, they don't have the full budget to consider, right? So they're just considering what's useful for their department.
I understand. Yeah, and I did speak to him, and we walked through all of it.
Yeah, and he's right in that it's a better machine for a lot of the trenching that he does, especially on water projects and sewer and drainage projects. So he's absolutely right that this is a better machine. The question is, does it fit in the borough's budget?
How does that work with the water department? I mean, the water department is separate.
Yeah.
From everything, and they use our equipment to do all the water department, so it's a borrowing type of thing.
Yeah.
And we can't put the water department to buy one of those machines or whatever. Not they can't, because we have $3.5 million, for
Mhm.
this year, but, I mean, they buy their own prototype backhoe or whatever type of thing.
I think if you weren't to fund this on the municipal side, you wouldn't fund this on the water side. That helps. But if you weren't to fund this on the municipal side, I don't think you would fund this on the water
No,
side.
no.
You would just say this isn't a necessary item for the borough to have, regardless of which hat it wears. But yes, we do try to share costs among our equipment. This is one that's, it's got to go in one bucket or the other.
Oh, I understand that, I know that the water department is separate from
Yeah.
everybody else, If we save money in the water department, we save money in the town.
Yep. Yep.
And Pat, if the mini excavator goes to landscape trailer, we go with it, right?
No, landscape trailer is separate. So the landscape trailer is an enclosed trailer. They have a landscape trailer now. We do a lot of mowing, and the idea would be to take the current trailer that we use for our mowers and use it for storage of equipment that we usually need, really quick. So if there's a water main break and you don't have time to load all the stuff you need into the truck, you have it set up on a trailer, take that with you. For the price, I think that's a good item because, while the town is only 2 square miles, if you're over by HCA Park and you need whatever it is in the shop that you didn't throw into the back of the truck in the 5 minutes you're trying to grab stuff to run to a water main break, it's really useful to have the trailer there. And so I think that the trailer is inexpensive for the benefit it would provide our DPW.
What are the two big ticket items that they have here? Which one, you spoke with Mike.
Yeah.
Which one, could he do without?
Well, and there's one more here, not big ticket, but the flashing signage at Prospect, the high school in Crescent. So those would be pedestrian crosswalk signal flashing signs, where currently in the street we have the stand-up pedestrian bollards. So to your question about which would I cut, I've already talked to Mike. He thinks that he recommends the cat loader over the mini excavator. So if I was to start cutting, I would take out the excavator and the flashing signs. and potentially the landscape trailer. I think it's useful, but you could, push, they've done without before, you could push it to a future year.
Yeah, but, I mean, I was down at the DPW one day, and they had the water main break, and they had to keep on coming back and forth.
Yeah.
Parts. I mean,
It's-
if they could have everything, like you said, in one area, just go.
Yep.
But that time that you're spending going back and forth, it costs a lot.
And we have trucks that are outfitted with a lot of our things, right? So we, the water truck that the borough funded 2 years ago has a larger extension back that, has a lot of the tools we need. But for a water main break or for some of these larger things that, there's a lot of stuff that you need on site. And you don't always know until you dig the hole. But yes, to your question, I think you start, you at least start at the mini excavator and work down.
Well, I think what we'll see is, once we get through this and, we start, some things might be obvious, keep or get rid of, and then we could probably get into
Yeah, yeah.
that.
And I've got my, my computer here, it's all in Excel, so I can start dragging and we can come to real numbers pretty quick.
Great.
So that should be helpful. All right. Any other questions on DPW? All right, so then the fire department, turnout gear, this is year-over-year expense, and it's necessary. If you don't fund it this year, you're gonna fund $50,000 next year. This equipment wears out. Fire hose and appliance is the same. Air pack cylinders, we're required to replace our air pack cylinders. To meet the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association. Did I get that right? And so this was a multi-year program, the last year of which is next year. We had funded $78,000, I think in this will be the fourth consecutive year, and then the fifth year would be $90,000, and we would have replaced all those packs in the borough.
I understand they have to do that because the cylinders have to be tested, and if they only have a life expectancy a certain kind of time. They have to do this every, I think it's 7 years or 12 years. So the cylinder, at least the cylinder.
Yeah, and this also is funding the face masks, and it has tools that are now required. There's a pass device that is on there, and a service time indicator, so how long that unit cylinder can be used for in a fire. All those are displayed, so those are requirements that we have to upgrade to. So again, one of those things that you can't really push off. Questions about that? All right. MSA multi-gas meters, again, something that they rely on heavily. This would be for 2 of their vehicles, one of their trucks and their command vehicle. The next item is for a command vehicle, $60,000. They had provided backup to us. I think they wrote about a page and a half on this. We met with them, and they had brought the same request in the previous years, that $90,000 command vehicle, and I had explained that if they want to be successful in this request, we got to do something different. And so they had taken that to heart. They had gone out, looked at other vehicles, made some concessions on their end, came back with a $60,000 ask, which at least the request of $60,000 is reasonable. If the borough chooses to fund a vehicle, that's a reasonable request for that type of vehicle, and it's in line generally with what we're paying for police vehicles. Obviously, this initial outfit is more expensive because we're buying all new radios to be equipped in the car. Whereas, usually police vehicles, we don't have that expense. But everything else, cost of the vehicle, the cost of the lights, all of that is really in line with what we pay for other municipal vehicles. So the question would be just on the merits of having a chief's vehicle. Should this happen, the plan would be for the chief to get a new vehicle, the assistant chief to get the current chief's vehicle. The current chief's vehicle is a 2010, so that is it's not going to run for many more years. When that would be replaced, that will go to the chief. Assistant chief will get the chief's vehicle, and then from there we would look to replace vehicles every about 10 years. Hopefully, we'll be replacing another vehicle.
You'd be essentially moving, right now, the assistant chief doesn't have a vehicle.
No.
This week, you're moving towards chief and assistant chief having.
That's right. Yeah, we provide the assistant chief a stipend for his vehicle, a small stipend, and he uses like more of a portable radio setup in his vehicle. So, you know, the importance of the assistant chief and the chief's vehicle is that they're responding directly to the fires instead of going to the firehouse and getting onto a truck that's going to the fire. So when they get there, you know, not just the lights and sirens and vehicles, but having a command post, which is what the vehicle acts as when you get to a fire, is important. And having an assistant chief's vehicle when the chief isn't available is important for them to have that vehicle. Both the chief and the assistant chief currently can respond from work for major incidents. So they might not respond for like a minor MVA or a small smoke alarm, but for, let's say, like a structure fire or something larger where a command presence was required, they would both be able to respond from their job.
And why do they need a second vehicle if they're not responding?
It would be if they were to respond.
And then
So they-
what
so
happens
for-
to the vehicle when it's not being responded with? Are they taking it to work with them? And
I think there would be an expectation that they would take this vehicle to work so that they could respond from work to large incidences that required a command vehicle.
but if you have two vehicles, don't you think one should stay on the property of the town and let whoever's running the command use it?
Well, how it is now, we're fortunate in that, well, no, I guess. Right now, the chief's vehicle is not in town. And you wouldn't leave it how it's generally set up, you wouldn't leave it somewhere parked so that the chief or the assistant chief could respond, get in that vehicle, and then go to the fire. You typically, and
If
you
they're
know.
not coming to a call.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I would say for some of our newcomers that the fire department's kind of putting Patrick in a tough situation here because every year they ask for a new chief's vehicle. They ask to make the old chief's vehicle an assistant chief's vehicle, and we've always said no. And from our perspective, I think it's been the mayor who's been a firefighter for many years, and we've always had council members on the fire department, have always kind of, suggested to us that that's not always necessary to have a second command vehicle. And so the mayor and council have never approved the chief's vehicle and with the new vehicle and keeping the old vehicle for a second command vehicle or an assistant chief's vehicle. So Patrick's doing a great job trying to speak for the fire department, but it's a tough ask because we're a small town and we've got 2 firehouses and lots of fire trucks, and they've never really been able to convince prior mayors and councils that they need a second command vehicle.
The only thing I totally agree with all, the only thing I worry about is the volunteer only service. So we at all worried that this is just gonna be like that morale and we'll lose volunteers.
We have mutual aid as well.
We're good.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't think our fire department would ever do something.
Just to
They'll be mad
comment
for a
on
week
that.
maybe, and then they'll just, they have to understand they can't get everything they want. Like DPW can't get everything they want, police can't get everything, But you gotta be practical. I mean, I think they should get a new chief vehicle. I mean, that one is old. It's been, a lot of chiefs been sitting in it, and it's time to get a new one. And, as Patrick said, they came to us last year for 90,000, and then they came down to 60. I mean, they really did their homework, and they really want it. And I think they deserve to get it because they did show an effort that they really want this.
See, we all agreed last year, they wanted it, but they just came up and did no explanation, they just threw up $90,000. And they didn't give us any details. We had the same issue with Mike Vittori was given wanted a supervisor's truck, and he gave a detailed breakdown of everything, and we were able to justify it then, but then now they're coming back and giving us a much better, I mean, if you read through this, it's a much better explanation. Plus, it's also, you gotta look at the next line item. And
I'm kind of partial with the fire department because I'm in the fire department, but the thing is, I mean, you have a second truck and both trucks are not in the town, that's kind of confusing. You gotta have a truck in the town. I mean,
If-
I don't care, they have their
Yeah.
own car, they can take that to work. I'm saying, like, say I'm a fire, I respond to a call, and I'm now the one who's in charge
Yeah.
of the scene. Now I'm in a fire truck that I have to respond to. and I'm in a fire truck that I have to do the command, when there is two vehicles that we have that are not even in the borough. I mean, maybe one should stay in the borough. I mean, the way they get to the firehouse to get in the truck, they could get to the firehouse to get into the chief's car and go. I mean, the chief should have his car. That's always been a standard practice. If we're gonna change it and have it so that they're gonna get another car, they gotta leave it here for someone to use.
I would agree with Mr. Mayor on that, especially if they're only going to be responding to big fires or big accidents. At least one vehicle will be at a firehouse for the third in command to go and get in that and go and respond to the fire.
I mean, if they were both coming to all the calls, I would say, great, they should have the cars with them. But, I mean, the chief needs his car with him. I mean, Walter's the chief, he doesn't work far. He could, he got his car, he gets where he has to go, great. But if you got another fireman that is taking the responsibility of being the commander at a scene, they should have the right tool to do their job.
I think that if the mayor and council have more questions, the fire chief should explain himself, because he would do a much better job than I am doing. But I think how I understood it, any incident that required a command vehicle, so, a smaller incident's not gonna require a command vehicle. If it's they had to put down, Speedy Dry because there was a rear end on Franklin Turnpike, that's not requiring a command vehicle. But for incidents that require a command vehicle, they would be responding in that command vehicle. Either the chief and/or the assistant chief. Both of them would,
Carbon monoxide would happen.
those, I don't know is the answer. And if those are the questions, then we should have an opportunity for them to come before you and address them directly.
You spoke with them, what did they tell you?
They expressed strong sentiment that they feel underappreciated, and they've been asking for this for a while, and they think it would be kind of like a reward and get more people to volunteer, and they think that they're not being appreciated for the volunteer hours that they put in here. Just telling you the truth. I mean, they'd be willing to come in and talk about this and answer questions as well.
I don't mind giving the vehicles, but one of them has to have a car.
And if they come, they need to have some data as to how frequently this stuff happens. I mean, it's great to plan for all this, but when you look back